10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ladies, gentlemen, and thems, welcome to the Mango Tree with your host, Mango. In this weekly broadcast, we will be discussing the current week's role rankings and team power rankings within the AD2L Champions League. Will we see some S ranks fall? Will we see your team climb to that top spot? Let's find out. Grab a snack, something to drink, buckle up, for this is this week's broadcast of the Mango Tree. Now, let's send it off to Mango to break down this week's role rankings. Thank you, Mango. And to kick off this week's role rankings, we have our movers in the carry category. Bernie Sanders in golf looked amazing, enough to bump him up from one tier of B to A. Had that performance been against a more reputable and higher ranked team, he might have bumped off Lorenzo for that S tier spot. And then we have Westlake, who did just enough to bump him up to B tier from C, but I think we can probably skip out on the Ember carry in the future. Gerber had a pair of great games, helped pull Dork Horse to a 2-0 upset over Team Awesome, and that will bring him from C tier to B tier. And then we have Bagged Milk, who had a pair of alright games and pulled out a good enough Underlord carry to bring him from the gutters of D tier and into C tier. Now, let's take a look at movement in the mid lane. Tommy Ruggs had a pleasant Bane mid and a tough draft blunder of a loss, but was able to squeak out Meepo in Game 2 and looked good enough to bring him into A tier. Midder Courier seemingly tried to cook a tad too hard against Flying Beavers with a Vino and Phoenix mid, both of which were unfortunately rather underwhelming on paper. This blunder is going to bump him down from B tier to C. And Sev seemingly took advantage of an easier matchup this week, and following a solid Tiny game, he whipped out the Techies mid and made a bold enough statement to bring him from C tier to B tier. And then we have Shrimp Tech, who stumbled and fell in his matchup against the reigning S tier Angry Sun with a pair of disappointing games. He'll be falling down one tier to C this week. And to kick off our off-lane movers, ladies, gentlemen, and thems, sound the siren. We have our first S-tier shuffle this week, and out of the ordinary subpar performance from Tree and a nigh flawless performance from HK in the upset 2-0 against Team Awesome will cause a swap between the two. HK steps into the S-tier spot for offlane this week, and Tree falls down into A-tier. And unfortunately, Phoenix had a pair of tough games against the Backdoor Bandits this week. He was able to squeak out a big comeback win in 1, but overall his performance is going to drop him down from one tier of A to B. Key tried to pull out a Venge 3 against Bob Monkey Destruction Force, and paired with a subpar Sand King game, this will pull Key down from B to C tier for this week. And I tried to find some way to sugarcoat this one, but Sar Bombaclat really struggled this week against Dork Horse with an 0-11 Lycan game. He'll be falling from C tier to D tier. And last but not least, we talk about the changes in our support rankings. First, our soft supports. Riley pulled out an impressive Invoker on the way to a promotion from B tier to A tier this week. I'd keep an eye on them going forward, vying for that top S tier spot. Pwn Dog went a combined 0-23 this week, sending them down from A tier to B tier. Had that 0-11 Tinker game not included a metric fuck ton of heals, he might have slipped further. Young Forever was a fundamental piece in Fungal Charmers being able to take a game off from Rhinos from AD2L, enough of a piece to bring him up from C tier to B. Mr. Burrito is another golf member that was able to take advantage of a favorable matchup this week, as he looked good enough on paper to move him from C tier to B tier. And Mathias played alright, but not quite at B tier level. This week he will crawl down to C tier. And kicking off our hard support rank changes is our first double tier climber and the first recipient of Mango's Mango of the Week award, the prestigious award for the best performer of the week. Crasheroni whipped out a pair of massively impactful and impressive Pugna games as he helped Dork Horse take 2 games off of Team Awesome. He'll be climbing from C tier all the way up to A tier. And then we have West Taiwan. He was a pest in the side of Jungle Farmers in both their games, enough of a pest to see a promotion from C tier to B tier. And then we have Leon, who was on the receiving end of Dark Horse's impressive performance. With a very rough Lion game and a disappointing Lich game, Leon unfortunately will be falling from B tier to C tier. Venosity certainly didn't look breathtaking, but they looked just good enough to squeak out of D tier and climb into C tier on the back of a solid Nyx game. And that will actually wrap up this week's role rankings. Now that y'all know I'm watching, prove to me why you should be higher next week. Now, let's move over to Mangoe to cover the team power rankings going into week 2. Thank you, Mangoe. Let's dive right in and start with the reigning champs. Golf maneuvered through a favorable matchup against Solar Dawn team with a pretty easy 2-0 to retain their 1 spot this week. It is to be seen if anyone is strong enough to bring them down from the top spot this season, but if anyone can do it, it might be Dark Horse, as the two go into an undefeated versus undefeated matchup for week 2. Dark Horse was able to dominate Team Awesome this week with a 2-0, of which they were virtually never playing from behind. This will give them a 3-spot promotion from 5th to 2nd, joining Golf as the only other undefeated team. I'm intrigued to see if they'll be able to continue their climb against Golf this week. The odds are likely against them, but only one team can come out undefeated. And whether or not I overranked Rhinos or underranked Fungal Jarmers is to be seen. But for now, a back and forth best of 2 against the preseason 8th ranked team in the league will drop Rhinos AD2L to the 3rd spot. They'll be looking to gain that spot back as they face 6th ranked Black Ops Angels this week. And Bob's Destruction Task Force faced a rather difficult drafting blunder in their first game and dropped a match to the preseason 9th ranked Goldfish Gaming. A strong Game 2 performance will keep them from falling any further this week, and they'll be paired with the Flying Beavers, a matchup that will surely help us determine whether Westlake and company can stay in the top 5. Backdoor Bandits nearly pulled off a 2-0 against Black Ops Angels, but this isn't a game of nearlies. They threw the end of their first game, and despite a bounce back in Game 2, they will drop 1 spot from 4th to 5th. Backdoor Bandits face off against Fungal Jarmers this week in what is to be an exciting matchup with both teams vying for a top 5 spot. And Black Ops Angels pulled off a miracle at the end of the first game against Backdoor Bandits and looked like they might have had a chance to do it again in Game 2, but they fell just short. They'll remain at 6 this week. Black Ops Angels will be facing against Rhinos from AD2L next. They've got something to prove if they look to end the week with some convincing wins. Come on, teleprompter. There we go. Alright. Fungal Jarmers was able to bounce back from a rough Game 1 loss against Rhinos from AD2L and pulled through a back and forth Game 2 on their way to a 1-spot promotion from 8th to 7th. Now they face off against 5th ranked Backdoor Bandits. Is this fresh stat going to prove the haters wrong? We'll see. Wasted Talent traded blows with the Flying Beavers in a 1-1 series where both teams managed a convincing win. Their drop from 7 to 8 this week had more to do with the quality of the opponent compared to Fungal Jarmers. Now, Wasted Talent has a chance to climb some spots as they face off against 9th ranked Goldfish Gaming this week. Goldfish Gaming took advantage of a poor draft in Game 1 from Bob Destruction Task Force to put together a solid game where they got the best of their opponents. Unfortunately, they faced a tough Meepo in Game 2 that saw the fountain quickly fall. They will remain at 9 this week, but going against 8th ranked Wasted Talent, they'll be looking to score some wins and overtake their opponents in next week's power rankings. And the Flying Beavers seemed to be losing control after a rough Game 1 loss to Wasted Talent, but bounced back for a convincing Game 2 victory. This team has potential, but I'll want to see more before they move up from their current spot of 10. And they'll certainly have that chance against Bob Destruction Task Force this week. Some solid W's could certainly move this stack into the upper half of next week's power rankings. And this week, I was rather surprised to see both of the teams I had ranked at the bottom of the list were the only 2 teams to go 0-2. I had intended to move Team Awesome up as I had felt I might have ranked them lower than they belonged, but going into Week 2 winless after a dismantling by Dark Horse, they will remain at 11 this week. Luckily for them, they have a chance to score a pair of wins as they face off against the bottom 12th ranked team, Solar Dawn. And Solar Dawn had the unfortunate luck of facing off against the reigning champs in Golf. And a bit of a gap in experience and ranked seemed to show as they were eviscerated 0-2. I'm rooting for these guys going forwards. Hopefully some experience will help them manage to pull out some victories, and they'll certainly need something to kick in this week as they face off against one of last season's best regular season teams in Team Awesome. Could they pull off an upset and send Team Awesome tumbling down to 0-4? We'll see. And I, for one, can't wait to see. That will be all for this week's Power Rankings. Now go over back to Mango at the main desk to wrap things up. Thank you, Mango. And thank you all for tuning in to AD2L's premier weekly content piece. Let's have some good games this week, play hard, fight harder, and I'll see you all at next week's broadcast of The Mango Tree.